All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this historic town hall um, preview and AMA. That means Ask Me Anything. We're gonna see how that works out because some of the stuff people ask is kind of crazy here. Want to introduce our audience to some new faces today. They're very happy and excited and honored to have on the Converge platform. We got some political strategist. I was thinking, what I used to say, Bush strategery. We got, we got some political strategery here. Up there in the top right corner, you see Michael Charles. And man, Michael's been holding it down for 15 years. He's a big time political strategist, award winner, and everything else. He's worked with some of the people like Council Member Zahalai and also Director Hersey, who will be with us tomorrow. Both of them will be there tomorrow. Political strategist doing his thing. And we also got Crystal Fincher, and she's the principal of Fincher Consulting, a full service political consulting firm, and a long list of accomplishments there. And also is the host of Hacks and Wonks on KVRU 105.7, and that's every Friday. Michael, Crystal, welcul
Thanks for having us, Omari. Honored to be here.
All right, well, it's good to have you. Jump right into it, man. This was a long day. These days get real long for me. But whenever I get to talk to people like you guys, man, the energy comes back in. I get to bounce it around and some of everything else. Man, let's just a lot of big news around community and everything else that's going on. But let's start with you first, Michael. Let's talk about, man, what's your take on the mayor and this $100 million that she's basically promised to invest in community?
I think a lot of times when we talk about systemic change, we talk about outcomes and intentions, and sometimes those intentions are not in line with outcomes. And I think that this seemingly from the outside seems to be the case of a situation where the intentions are there, but as we talk about the strategy that's in place that seemingly takes some money from the jumpstart that communities and underserved interests fought tooth and nail, honestly, to get forward, especially in relation to what had just happened with the job tax just so recently before. So I think that to kind of pit that up against what's communities demanding and asking for with the defund, and kind of putting those up against each other, it's to suggest that somehow that wouldn't be ID'd and snuffed out right away, I think was naive in its approach in some respects. And I was excited to see the community people with like the voters, like Seattle voters are really smart. And I think that if you try to get a fast one by people, you're oftentimes going to find yourself out of luck. And I think that was what happened. Going to council here, I think we're going to see a different response than what was put forward from the mayor. And, it'll be interesting to see how that is portrayed by the administration. So it was an interesting way to go about trying to assuage what they saw as demands, and rather than, I think, taking really thinking deeply about what we needed to do to make bigger change. We see this a lot with attorneys in politics, and a lot of times we see people telling us what a lot of the reason why we can't do things is because of what's going on legally, and maybe what we can or can't do. And it's, I think we have to really step outside of that regular paradigm and think deeper about what's possible. And I applaud the council for honestly taking some big steps and really to do things that might be seemingly in the short run cost them some negatives. And you kind of see the mayor trying to see if they can, with election coming up next year, seeing if she can kind of get some points back for what traditionally had been, if there was a negative, they could push it off to council. And so I think we're seeing right now kind of a reaction to that, and we're seeing the community kind of give feedback immediately.
Well, this is the community, and I'll let you jump in here, Crystal. It's just like, I was talking about this morning. It's like, yo, here's $100 million, and the community is kind of like, I'm gonna think about it. Crystal, first question is, do you think that this $100 million is actually even real? You know what I'm saying? Like it can materialize at the end of the day, considering the budget shortfall, considering Council Member Mosqueda sent a 4-page letter out today with all of her concerns about it. Do you think that this $100 million will actually make it from A to Z and real? And two, I mean, what do you think about the mayor's efforts with her investment in community?
Do I think the $100 million is real today? No. I don't think that there is a reason that she has given anybody that she is operating in good faith here. What we've seen leading up to this is her making these, wonderful statements. There's no shortage of press conferences, but when you look at the substance of what she's proposing, it falls dramatically short. It doesn't matter if you label it reimagining or whatever her version of avoiding saying defunding is, but when you look at what she has proposed and what she has vigorously fought, she has fought the reforms that the community is demanding. She's fought the budget that the council put forward. She has not come up with a coherent and balanced budget, even including this. There's language in there, well, the council needs to find some more money here. This needs to, come together over there. So really what she's saying is, I'm putting together a nice press release with a number on it, but in terms of money available now, are you committing to do this now? That isn't there. And there's a dramatic lack of detail in what she's proposing. And I think that there is a way, to Michael's point, that a lot of politicians have traditionally operated, and that they see success in like announcing an initiative and like signing a piece of paper, but they actually aren't focused on what is the change in the community. How does that impact people's lives? It's something to appoint a task force, but like that's a task force. That actually isn't an accomplishment. And a lot of people have gotten away for too long with thinking that it is. Thinking that that's taking action, and it's not.
All right. Well, the mayor, she released a video statement yesterday about the budget, and one of the feedbacks was, we'll play a few minutes of it here. The whole clip's about 4 minutes. We'll play just the first few minutes here. But one of the feedbacks is that the mayor's talking points are now community's talking points, and that's just double-sided. Issue there is one that could very well mean that, hey, the mayor's listening to community and she's pushing forward the points that community finds important, or it could be like, well, the mayor's extrapolated some buzzwords that the community is excited around, and we'll move there. But anyways, let's play a minute or two of this from the mayor's budget address on Tuesday.
That starts with promising and delivering to community more investments. And I'm talking on the scale of, I think.
And that's the wrong one. Here we go.
For too long, we've allowed our systems to perpetuate inequity, particularly against our Black neighbors. That is why this budget also begins to address the historic disparities brought forward by the COVID-19 pandemic and since the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. I signed my first executive order the day I was sworn into office, focusing our efforts around race and social justice. Since then, as a city, we have made record investments to advance equity and justice. Things like $1.5 billion in new affordable housing to build thousands of new units, nearly $100 million on quality preschool and childcare, more than $30 million in our Equitable Development Initiative to invest in community-based organizations that are working to combat displacement, like Africa Town, Ethiopian Village, the Filipino Community Center, Chief Seattle Club, and Bird Bar. We've spent $40 million for youth safety and a 7-year commitment for free college and a program to get those students jobs so they can be.
All right, now the mayor goes on there to talk about how they're doing other things with like police and trying to move call centers and hire social workers and everything else. I'll throw this back out to you guys. has the mayor just heard what community said, and now she's like, man, I hear you, and I'm working diligently to try to act, on your behalf, or is this something else? I'll let you take it first, Michael.
Sure. I mean, there in politics, everybody knows your budget really speaks to your values, and I think that out of everything that was said throughout all that, I mean, look at the budget, and I think whatever you see in the budget is what actually is going on in those values. So I mean, you look at the budget, it seems there's some cuts, but they can come in transportation and parks and things that seem to be investments in community that we really care about. So I find sometimes that the rhetoric doesn't match the intentions of what we're actually going about saying in public. So I think that there's some disconnect there, and I think that there's some opportunities to do some more genuine work with figuring out what, if the community is saying this, then what does that look like in the dollars and cents in a budget? And I don't know that connect was actually was followed through on in what we saw presented yesterday. So.
Right. And Crystal?
I mean, I think she was making an attempt to sound like she really got it, right? But like, she's talking about a number of things that have existed and that aren't new initiatives. She's talking about things like moving the 911 operations, moving parking enforcement. That is not what people are talking about with SPD. They're talking about police patrolling the streets and dealing with that. She is very careful to avoid talking about that. And, I'm sorry, we just watched that ad, and an issue where she has been so criticized so much for not getting it and for seeming so detached. She didn't help herself with that very polished, very produced video that's trying really hard to convince people that she really gets it, when she's still saying the same things that aren't getting at what people are demanding.
Right. Well, so if the mayor, when I've been following, you guys have been following it much longer than me. That's like your profession, is following all this political strategery out here. But the mayor, when we talked to her on Friday, looks like we lost Crystal. I'm sure she'll be back. When we talked to the mayor on Friday, and the mayor talked about this task force, and the way that she's kind of positioned it or brought it out is that, like, the task force, there we go. The way that the mayor, welcome back, the way that the mayor talked about this task force. I want to talk to you guys really about this, because it's like, community, and some people in the community, at least the vocal ones that we hear, are like, man, this task force is all bad. They feel that, they want to go this participatory budgeting route. I feel like, I think one of the quotes here in the King County Emerald is that, like, this task force is, when we say community, we don't mean some task force that is cherry picked by white, wealthy people who already have access to political power. And that was Sean Glaze right there. Very blunt and direct, at least how Sean and King County Equity Now feels about this task force route. What do you guys think about this task force? And if the task force isn't the proper way, what do you feel is the best way when you're talking about administering or divvying up this $100 million?
I mean, I think it is worth talking about who is making the decisions about who's being on the task force, and what are the motivations. Why are they appointing the people there? Now, I'm not anti-participatory budgeting. That can be a useful tool, but it can also be a tool to stop things from happening. Like, we've all seen things die in task forces. It makes them look like they're working on something, but it's a way sometimes, if people really don't want something to happen, just to put it over there. It now looks like they can in public say, I appointed a task force, they're working on it, they'll come with recommendations, and then we just don't hear anything else about it. I think we have to be very careful, and I'm without judging anyone who's on that task force, to say, when we see the mayor herself appointing people as leaders of the movement, that's not the mayor's place. That's not some of those people's place. The movement can tell you who their leaders are, but you can't say that person is, I decide that they are. And the times that they've tried to do that have turned out poorly for them. So I don't know if they have incorporated that feedback in what they're doing. And I think that, again, the motivations are suspect because up until now, everything has been used to cover up or to try and paper over that she's not really trying to defund.
Right. Well, yeah, and she's made that clear that she's not trying to defund. Is that so? Here's the thing: do you think that if this $100 million was real or is real, and it could come out whatever and be distributed in a way that community wanted and everything else, do you think the community would still want defund? Like if the same amount of money was in a pot, if it wasn't in this crisis and everything, and the city was like, okay, well, man, you guys want 50% instead of defunding the police by 50%. Here's $200 million. Would community want that money, or they still want the police defunded?
This is about people's lives.
This is not about $100 million.
It's not. Yeah. I mean, we watched a video last night of an SPD officer holding his gun through the door, pointing at people who were just having a conversation with him. This is about what we've seen on the streets and people being tear gassed in their homes and people being beaten on the street and people being run over with bikes and people this is about actual lives and bodies. And so we can throw budget numbers at that, and we do need to invest in community, right? It's not like we can ignore that either, but we can't act like if we do something over here, we're going to forget about the issue of literal life and death on the other side. We can't ignore that.
Right. You were saying, Michael?
I mean, I just think, can you put a price on Manny Ellis's life? Can you put a price on Tommy Lake? Can you put a price on Charlene Lyles? I ask, is this worth $100 million? I mean, I don't think so in the end. And to think that it is again, a naive approach to what we see as a need for systemic change. And I don't think that this is an issue that is unique to just this movement or this moment in time. I think this is something that people have been calling for hundreds of years. So, I mean, that $100 million, I mean, unless you're giving it directly to people in their hands, I just don't understand how you think it's going to make an impact that will change people's minds in any way.
Right. Well, and I have a question for you guys, is that we hear, when we talk about community, this is a big discussion usually on the morning show, is community, who is community, who represents who and everything else. I mean, who do you think, speculation here, is influencing the mayor or has, or is advising the mayor? I mean, we only see really visually out here in a big way is King County Equity now. I'm sure there are other groups, but we don't see them on the radar. As a media person, I gotta call out to people hey, if you're a different group, a different agenda, talk to us, let us know, we want to hear from you. And man, it's for the most part, it's radio silence out there. But do you think, for example, this task force, did the mayor talk to other Black people in the community and they came up with this? You think that's something that they came out of her office with, or what? Is there anybody else who do you think that's influencing the mayor saying, nah, I also represent community and this would be best for our community? I'll let you take that, Crystal.
I mean, from my vantage point, she has had a challenge with just communicating with and connecting to community. And it seems like she's wanted to limit her exposure to community overall and say, I want to deal with a couple people, who want to deal with me and let's figure out how we can, make something look decent. And so a lot of people have viewed that as kind of a divide and conquer strategy, or, trying to really co-opt what people are calling movement. Now, is that the case with everyone involved? Probably not. But I don't know that they are really equipped or understand what like real outreach into the community looks like from that office. And I think that's been reflected in some of the tone deafness that we have heard from her over the past few months. So I think that they could definitely use some help.
Give our viewers, so why we do these shows is to educate people, right? You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of people new in the process and everything else. So I want to stop you right there. Maybe you can give some examples to our viewers of what you called out as tone deafness over the past few months.
When we have, when protests were on the early side and protests were nonviolent, they were, just regular people expressing their opinions as they have so often, people marching, not inciting anything. And the force that they were met with from SPD, and I mean, there's tons of video, right, where we saw people
I took most
standing.
of it.
Yeah, exactly. You streamed it. We were watching your stream most of the time.
Exactly.
And we saw the SPD introduce violence into those situations. We saw them escalate violence in so many situations. And then we'd see Jenny Durkan have a news conference the next day and act like everything was fine, and act like everything is normal, and act like, and if anything, putting blame on the people who were injured for exercising their constitutional right. And then, the confusion as to, okay, well, I'm going to, make an order that they can't tear gas people. And then they do it. And then, first acting like they weren't actually doing it, and then not being able to answer what was going on there. It just seemed like there was a complete absence of leadership and no urgency on her part to think, okay, this is not okay. It's not okay to do this to my residents. They are suffering and they are upset. And taking action based on that. It just seemed like it was very relaxed, and like she was much more concerned with placating, some more moneyed interests, some people who had a vested interest in maintaining the status quo, while we saw SPD-induced violence and chaos on the street, right? So it just seemed like there's a disconnect as to what her residents are really going through and who she's really accountable to.
Right. Well, I know one thing for sure, because I was there, and I mean, I ate all that tear gas and pepper spray and blast balls. Got hit with several of the impact munitions, rubber bullets, whatever you want to call it. And what one thing people don't really understand, right, is two things. Is that, the city wants the citizens to trust them. We put our trust in the mayor. The majority of people put their trust in the mayor. The mayor's going to lead. And then the mayor's appointments, the police chief, the fire chief, things like that. The city government wants the citizens to trust them. But that Sunday, I guess that was May 31st. Man, that was the most peaceful march I had been on.
Yeah.
Those guys was trying to kneel and pray everywhere, and they got turned away on 11th and Pine 2 or 3 times. I mean, it was crazy. The police, they come right up there, and the police didn't let them pass. That was the most peaceful protest I've been in. It's on video, and I remember because I marched for 8 hours that day with those guys. And I always think that it's like city government wants the people to trust them, but government didn't trust the people enough that day to let them pass on Pine Street. And the outcome here in the protests in Seattle might be much different. The other thing I was going to point out is that I do agree that there was it was out of touch, because that Monday when the tear gas came out, before there was people there. It was George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Charlene Lyles. When that tear gas came out, the thing is, the next day it activated a whole bunch of people who was just sitting at home minding their business. It turned into a residential protest, and that's something city of Seattle never seen before. They'd only seen something downtown. These same people who literally lived right across the street from the police station now became protesters out there on the front line. And people downtown didn't realize that at that point, after Monday, people were no longer protesting against police brutality. They was there too. They were protesting against the East Precinct. But downtown, their conversation was still about, oh, we understand your outrage about George Floyd. We understand your outrage about Breonna Taylor. And no one addressed the fact that, no, people was outraged even more at the East Precinct. And so, I mean, I'm just giving people an example of the disconnect that was going on there. And for weeks, City Hall never, I'm telling them, I was like, people are just mad at the East Precinct for getting gas. You probably want to say something. It was never said.
Yeah, it was never said. And, this is her responsibility. She is the mayor. There is no other person to go to. There's no, higher authority in the city. The buck stops with her. And the police chief serves at the mayor's pleasure. So really, Jenny Durkan was sitting there saying, well, I'm not sure, not having answers. And it didn't seem like she felt like she should have answers or like she particularly cared about getting answers. And, the severity of tear gassing people, in their own neighborhood, in their own homes, in addition to on the streets, like that is a harmful chemical agent that messes with your reproductive system. Like this is not consequence-free activity here. Sometimes people suggest that just because it's non-lethal, that it doesn't hurt. And like there were days that she said up there, oh, nobody was hurt. And we saw pictures of journalists bloody, of protesters bloody. And it's like, well, if this doesn't count as a person enough for you to mention that there was an injury, like who are you the mayor of? If your people are not injured, if that doesn't count, what are you even doing? Like, do you not answer to them? Are these not your constituents? So I think it's that disconnect and just not feeling a connection to or any accountability to the people who are being harmed on the street.
Right. Any thoughts on that, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, eventually to me, it's about like, what's your political philosophy and your approach to governing? And like, is it to lift up the voices of the most underserved, to really like prioritize those, and as the people that you're hoping to serve most, as like we say, especially in democratic politics, people like to propose and make as a primary value of theirs. And so I just wonder when you are you able to, what mental gymnastics do you have to do in order to justify in your head what I see as not prioritizing the needs of those that are really like being victims of state violence at that point. So to me, it's about your governing philosophy. I wonder, like, what other issues are you approaching with a similar philosophy? It begins to, chip away at the general trust of public. And I think you nailed it at the beginning, Omari, that the situation at hand here is one of trust, and government and democracy only works at trust. And we regularly talk about this at the national level, and we need to always remember that all politics is local. And if we're not bringing it back home and thinking about, are we following through with promises? Are we keeping our word? Can we depend on our leaders to do what they say they're going to do? If not, then that fundamental promise is being broken between its people, and the system just doesn't work. And so if we're not finding it in ourselves to follow through on this work, then what role do we see ourselves actually in these positions of power?
Right. And now something else I want to bring up here is that what we've seen a good amount of pushback on, amongst many things, is this issue of Black and BIPOC. In the original statement back in June 7th, it was like investment in Black community, and it's now investment in BIPOC community. And people in our community understand the difference, but in the broader sense, a lot of people don't. But I want to play this clip here first of Mayor Durkan when she was on our show on Friday, and my co-host Trey on a holiday asked her about the change from investment in Black community to BIPOC.
Well, I have a question about the community because June 7th, there was a statement that came out from you saying, you know, I'm going to do this investment specifically in the Black community. And then later it was changed to BIPOC. And I want to understand the difference between the two, or what caused that shift, because we have understood that statistically, the numbers have shown that it's really Black families that are at the bottom of the scale, really. It's like Black and Native families. I just want to hear from you what the change was there, because there was a direct statement saying investment into Black communities, and now it's really about this kind of BIPOC communities. And historically, we know that Black, struggles, a lot of times they get co-opted. So I'm just wondering from you, what was the change in the shift there?
So I think there's been, from a number of communities, the sense of a range of people left behind. And if you look at, for example, in the pandemic, who has suffered most of the health and economic consequences, it is the Black community and the Latinx community. And you look at the social outcomes and the graph that you're showing right now, the income by race. So I am interested in talking to people. It could be that the task force says, because of what you're saying, we are going to invest in the Black community and outcomes disproportionately. And we think that that's where we need to get the metrics, because we've looked at the facts, and we look at the fact when I was growing up here, and Omari knows this better than I, 75% of the Central District was owned and lived in by Black people. Today, it's less than 14%. That kind of gentrification has not occurred in any other demographic. And the impacts of that, you look at what's happening in North King County and South King County, people are tied together. So we are going to really focus on how do we, this is in conjunction with cultural spaces. We announced this week, we sent down that Bird Bar Place now is owned by the community. The Salisbury Senior Center is, we introduced that legislation together with Fire Station 6. We also have to look for those properties we can reclaim for community. So I agree with you completely that the Black community itself has got to be a focus of this, but I don't want to dictate that. I really believe that's got to come from the collective voice.
All right, so let's start with you, Crystal. One, Black and BIPOC, and the mayor's response to this question that, well, I agree with you. The Black people are a priority, but the task force needs to determine that the Black people are a priority.
I mean, I guess I would start with her ending statement, right? Like, I don't want to dictate. Well, she did. That was what the question was about. She did, and then it changed. So what she avoided doing or didn't want to explain somehow is how that changed. And so does she no longer stand by her word? That's kind of, we've seen that happen where she said something, it changes, and then she acts like it's completely out of her control. She sets the terms of what that working committee is looking at, right? So she's talking about it has to come from community. She is dictating what the community is putting together. And I guess I question there, does she really understand why those two different terms exist and why making a distinction is important? I don't think she does. And can you let our guests know, again, there's a lot of new people who come in here. We already see it in the comments. Why is it a big deal when, in our community, the distinction with Black and BIPOC? And a lot of times what happens when Black gets rolled into BIPOC? Well, as the person who is asking the question alluded to, some outcomes and some things are unique to Black people, right? Just like everything is unique to different people. We, even in the Black community, are not a monolith. And then to suggest collectively people of color share the same issues, have the same impacts and outcomes is like ridiculous on its face, right? Like we don't even think about that with the white community, but we're going to group everyone else together and act like everything applies equally to this group. It applies differently to different groups. And impacts are usually most felt, and negative impacts are usually most felt by Black people, Indigenous people, right? Like, so that term BIPOC came from wanting to center the most affected and to try and address those identities and that reality head on. Now, I give space to this is a conversation that is probably further down the line in Seattle and in metropolitan areas than it is in a lot of, suburbs, rural areas, other areas. Not everyone is engaged in the same place. And I don't hold it against someone if they aren't, if they don't know what the term is or, use it or feel a certain way. Like, people can be in different places with just their understanding of things. And I leave space for them to learn and come to their own experience with it. But if Jenny Durkan starts out saying, we are doing this for the Black community, and if we are looking at statistics that point out very different impacts for the Black community than others, to then say, well, we're addressing everyone, ignores that specific harm to the Black community and is a way to avoid addressing that is really what the issue is.
Right. And Michael, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, this comes down to like a fundamental understanding of the idea of, if we're helping Black communities, the rest of these POC, Indigenous POC communities are going to be helped as well. Because when we're saying, are we helping the most underserved? Are we prioritizing the most underserved? If we are, then everybody else is going to be like brought along and have the same opportunities if we're helping the most underserved. I mean, it seems like a simple shift to make in your head of an understanding that if you're going to help those that need the most help, and that's clear from everything that you're saying and everyone you're talking to is Black folks, then I mean, we should prioritize Black folks. And I just, to me, it's again, like, what's the mental gymnastics there? I understand that you have various constituencies varying for various dollars. However, it just makes you come down to the conclusion, are you serious about solving this issue or not? And again, I think this is where the fundamental issue of trust comes into play, and where we're like, really, can we believe what you're saying when you say one thing and it's not, it's you're saying one thing out of one side and then you're doing another thing. It's really hard to be predictable, to understand what's the vision to what's actually what's possible. So it just feels a little chaotic in its approach as well.
All right. So we talked some about what the mayor is doing right or wrong. What is community doing right or community doing wrong in this approach here? You know what I'm saying? How can it be more effective? Are we really hearing from the community? Is there a community to hear from? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's the state of things from the community side as you see it? I'll start with you first, Michael.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see. So for so long, I mean, we've seen City Hall dominated by voices of the people that can show up in the middle of the day, that are grass tops interests, or people that have, just had the time and energy and resources to be able to be a part of these discussions regularly. And I think what's been most powerful about the quarantine of platforms like Converge, South Seattle Emerald, all these local media sources really starting to zero in and doing a great job of asking tough questions, is that the public is starting to respond. They're seeing through what has typically been a process that has not been under a lot of eyes, and you're seeing people get engaged. I think that these platforms of allowing City Hall to be accessible via video, Zoom now formats, I think it's making it more accessible for people to have a voice in the process. And the more that people can speak up, and I think this is really seeing what we talk about with people power, with organizing. I mean, people can debate all day what community is, who's community, but at the end of the day, community is ultimately who shows up and who's organized and who has, is doing the most. So I think, you can say there's all sorts of ideas, and sometimes there are these underserved voices that aren't being represented. And I think that's what's really exciting right now, is to see people that haven't typically been a part of the process being engaged, being empowered like they haven't in other parts of history. And I think a lot of that's due to the national climate. A lot of it's also due to, like I said, a lot of cool news sources just really covering it in different ways. Thank you, Omari. Again, a shout out to y'all for doing a great job of providing this platform to people that, like you said, typically haven't been involved in the process.
Man, right on. I appreciate it. We out here trying to push it. Crystal, what are your thoughts? Like, what is community doing right? Maybe what can community do better going into this process? I mean, they're going up against. I mean, for me, Mayor Durkan is in office right now, right? This is the mayor right now. But a lot of these issues that plague our community, if we look at the chart, it's been in constant decline. You know what I'm saying? Regardless of mayor, regardless. I mean, in an all Democrat kind of setup over here as well. You know, going into this political season, that everything's gone down. Income's gone down. Home ownership's gone down. School's gone down. Under leadership, Democratic leadership downtown and in the state legislature and everything else. What I'm only saying is all these issues are larger than Mayor Durkan. She's there right now. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of these issues, if she did say she didn't run again, if she just, like, a lot of these issues would be there after Mayor Durkan. But what is it that community can be doing, or what is the things that community should be looking for to address things in a bigger way and to change things systemically? I mean, we talk about defund. That's one thing that's going to go one place for social service, things like that. What are some of the big systemic changes that community should be trying to look at?
I mean, I feel like I want to pause a little bit and a step back and to look at context, because I feel that, you know, we can nitpick around the edges, but community has been as effective as anything that we've seen in years in Seattle. You know, we saw a civil rights movement across the country. We've seen several different cities and the politicians talk about, hey, we're going to do A, B, and C. We're responding in this way, right? And in several cities, that fizzled out. And the difference, I think, in Seattle, and it is Seattle community showed up, stayed out, and focused on accountability, focused on asking for a specific outcome and holding people accountable to that outcome. And, you know, people a lot of times try and talk about, like, what's the point of protest? What are you even asking for? Okay, we just saw a historic vote. It's one on the way to what people are ultimately asking for. But across the country, Seattle is actually leading in terms of policy and figuring this out. So Seattle is actually blazing a trail for the rest of the country. I think we should recognize, like, pause and recognize how powerful the people here are, because that doesn't happen without community. That does not happen without community. The commitment to defund from a majority of the council does not happen without continual pressure. The passage of the initial budget, and then the veto override. It doesn't, you know, you can have people willing to take a vote on the council, right? Like, you have some people who are consistent votes with the community. Then you have some people who are kind of in between, right? And it's the pressure on those that really made the difference possible. And so that doesn't happen without community. So I want to pause and be like, look, people are powerful, and that was just demonstrated, and use that as a lesson and learn from it and take it into the next budget fight that's coming up around the corner. Take it into, yes, and conversations about the Seattle Police Officers Guild contract, which has as much to do with police accountability as the chief, as the mayor, you know, really what's in that contract. So applying the same lessons and the same tactics, that's a predictable result. It's accountability to a degree that we have not seen for a long time.
Well, I did an interview earlier today with a news station on the East Coast, and I was telling them whether you agree or disagree with what's going on here in Seattle in 90 days, you know, 90% from protests to, you know, to legislation and a budget being submitted, you know what I'm saying, gets vetoed. Vetoes overrided, and, you know, the next few days later, you got the mayor, even though our TV show said, hey, I'm gonna free the funds. She put out a press release today saying that she's releasing some funds out to community. I mean, 90 days, you're right. It's warp speed. And when I talk to people, talk to other journalists across the country and everything else, they're like, yo, man, whatever's going on in Seattle is way, way ahead of any other city.
Yeah, it is directly attributable to, you know, people on the streets and just saying, hey, we're not giving up. We are continuing to march for justice. The amount of people who called in to that veto override meeting and, you know, from everywhere, from wherever they were at, and just like talked about, hey, who are you accountable to? Calling out specific council members, asking for like very specific change and saying, we are watching, we're holding you accountable. It just shifted the balance of power, because for so long we've seen moneyed interest, special interests have a very outsized voice in, you know, politics everywhere, including Seattle, and you know, more attention given to them, and a feeling, you know, I know from a viewing angle, like it looked like several council members, you know, in the past were certainly more concerned with what their donors thought than what their constituents thought, and that flipped. And so that's power, that's community. We can talk about things around the edges, but ultimately they've been effective. They've been as effective as anything that we've seen in decades.
All right. No, undeniable on that. It's what you had something to add to that, Michael?
I mean, I was just gonna echo exactly what.
Uh-oh. Did we lose him?
Looks like a little make.
I still got you. He'll be back here in a minute. we'll bring him out there right here. Let me pop forward here real quick. What is it? So tomorrow it's a town hall it's a town hall format, in which, you know, everybody's kind of presenting whatever it is they want to present, and then you know, open for questions. For us at Converge, I think it was important for two reasons. Is like, man, you know, for people to have a civil discussion, you know, which is very important. We got him back? Not yet. To have a civil discussion, but also to put everybody on the same platform, meaning that, you know, when the mayor, here we go, we got him back. You're back now. So when the mayor, and this is any mayor, so it's not to Mayor Durkan or anything. When a mayor makes an address from the mayor's office, that they have a platform that's much larger than, you know, any community group, whether it's, you know, King County Equity Now or the Seattle Green and Gardening Association. No matter who it is, I mean, the mayor's office, that platform is huge. The average community group, that platform is small. What we're going to see tomorrow is on the exact same platform, you know. And so, yeah, of course, it's not the same thing. Everybody's going at different times and things like that, and they're presenting their case to the public. But at Converge, because we see that, because, you know, we follow these things, we see press releases, we see all these things. It's massive media because it's City Hall, and that's what it's supposed to be. Community and community voices and things like that are a much smaller scale. So one thing that we're excited about is that, you know, 3 hours, people can see and hear from, you know, from these different people all in the same place. But what are some of the things that you would like to hear Mayor Durkan say tomorrow that you would walk away and be like, okay, I can feel that?
For me, right, I think one thing that we haven't focused on enough until now, and that is, you know, within her purview, is dealing with the Seattle Police Officers Guild contract. We have a situation where even regardless of who the chief is, they can instill discipline. They can say, hey, this officer did something wrong, I'm disciplining them. And because of the terms in the guild contract, that can be just undone. And the tools that are available to regular people in like other regular positions are completely absent. Like those have been completely negotiated away. So what we all, a lot of times hear are, we need a regional solution. What I'm excited about the stage tomorrow night is that there will be a regional stage. So everything from the Police Officers Guild contract and the changes that are necessary from a legislative to a local level, and having those have to be coordinated, can be addressed. People talk about we need a regional solution to homelessness and addressing that issue. Well, there are people who can speak to every level of that on the stage. So the issues that we've seen in action on, and a lot of times, well, this is too big, we have to act in coordination with others. Man, they're all going to be on the same stage. And that to me is exciting. And I'm hoping to hear substantive conversation about specific action that can be taken at those different levels to create change.
Right. And now Mayor Durkan, I forget which press conference it is. I watch too many of them these days. But in one of them, she said that one of her objectives is to transform negotiations with police unions, not only in Seattle, but across the state of Washington. And I need to look that up. But I'm paraphrasing. She said that was something that she wanted to be doing as part of this reimagination. We haven't really heard her put anything forward on that yet. But do you think that and I'll throw this to you, Michael, do you think that Mayor Durkan could actually make some leeway with SPOG? And one thing I'll tell you real quick is that interview that I did with Director Meyerberg from OPA was real eye-opening, and it was real enlightening. Because, at the end of the day, the way that the contract is written is like that he can sustain something. The chief can sustain something. The chief could fire somebody. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, in ultimately, there is no final whatever. Then, it can go to the court, and then a judge has to do whatever and everything else. It's very difficult for them to be able to actually do a lot of things. And a lot of the power actually lies on behalf of the police. And another thing people don't realize is like that agreement is between the city and the union. The chief is just kind of sitting out there. You know what I'm saying? And so it's kind of crazy how the dynamics are around the police contract, not only here in Seattle, but across the country. Do you think that Mayor Durkan can actually make progress in regards to this contract? And the contract is up December 31st, I believe.
I'd like to believe that she can. I think that if anybody's in a position to be able to do it, it would be her. I mean that, and you look at her background as the district attorney, and you think about her legal experiences, and I mean, I think if anybody were to do this and coming into an election year, if you have an opportunity to make a real systemic change, I mean, I think now is your opportunity. I would be surprised if she wasn't trying to do something. So, I wouldn't be quick to dismiss that as not going to happen. I do think that there's probably a desire to get something done because she has stated publicly many times not wanting to engage. And I know we have trust issues and we've discussed this thoroughly throughout the show. But, if we're not engaged, I also want to give a shout out to the community because I do think that they put this as a priority in that office. And I do think if there's a way that they can get a win out of this, that they're going to push in every direction that they can. Because right now, the people have spoken. And to get reelected, there's got to be some big actions had. And I think that this is an opportunity and we will see action. I like to believe.
Right. And you were offline, but now that you're back, I asked Crystal, what would you like to hear Mayor Durkan say tomorrow? And of course, Crystal brought up that she wants to hear about what actions are going to be taken with the police contract. What are some of the things you'd like to hear the mayor talk about tomorrow?
Well, especially as we talk about Black Lives Matter, which I'm sure will be repeated many times tomorrow. I like to a stronger understanding of the intersectionality of that statement in. Especially as we talk about homelessness, especially as we talk about a lot of these supposedly intractable issues that what are we doing to actually support Black people, not just in police reform, but in housing and all the other areas that people are falling short in entrepreneurial opportunities and in job trainings and all sorts of opportunities. So whatever we can do, I want to hear, in addition to all the actions that's going to be done surrounding police reform and those issues and defunding the SPD. I want to know too about though, and I see a greater understanding of the intersectionality at play, and is there a grasp and understanding of when we say Black Lives Matter, that means too when we look at homelessness and the disproportionality that exists for Black folks within that issue just alone. So the more that we can have a better grasp that no, our community isn't just upset about one issue. We have a lot of focus right now and momentum behind one issue, and there's a lot of work being done. I'm excited to hear about all this research happening for all these policies that are taking place. So I'm excited to see. I'd like to see, is there going to be an embrace of a lot of this research being done coming from these communities? So just that type of insight into what's going on beyond just these issues at hand today, but what's the greater vision for our community as a whole beyond today, beyond next week, but for the next 10 years? That's what I'd like to see.
All right. Well, I got a good feeling about tomorrow. I mean, there's nothing. It's a starting point, and I'm telling everybody, it's like we shouldn't have expectations for all problems to be solved, but it is a starting point, and it is like I said, it's the first time that that we'll see, city government and community on the same platform, whatever that platform might be. You know what I'm saying? It's the same. It's an equal platform in that sense. And so, for us, Converge, we're happy to see that part. In where we're the same platform, people can be able to see and judge for themselves, and these questions. And then I hook you guys up with I'm sure you maybe even submitted questions over there to Mark, because you guys got so many questions. I can already tell. It's like, yo, we want to know this, we want to know that, we want to know this, we want to know that. I wanted to touch on the national scene here for a second. I know we're almost to the end of the hour, but before we do that, I just want to play this clip for the debate last night and get you guys' thoughts on it. But before we do that, and this segment going into tomorrow's town hall, maybe you can share with our audience, what is it that I guess I'm trying to say, what is it that the average citizens here in Seattle could be or should be doing? Like, there's a lot of people who are trying to, I'm telling you, like, comments here on this show and comments on so many shows, so many people, Michael, you hit it, are coming into the process. They're coming in, and people ask questions like, man, what can we do? How can I get involved? How can I follow things? How can I be part of the process? Maybe you guys as political strategists can get some advice. We'll start with you, Crystal.
I mean, for me, as I'm looking at what is going to be consequential coming down the line, certainly getting engaged in the SPOG contract, the Seattle Police Officers Guild contract negotiations, because as you talked about, that does impact. Like, we cannot have this conversation about accountability, about any kind of restructuring, reimagining, any kind of ability to address abuses without addressing that contract and what it allows. So there has to be more visibility on it than there has before. I think the community is ready. It's a bit of a different process. So it's like, I think it's worth continuing to talk about, hey, this is who is responsible for, each element of negotiation and approval. This is the steps that are involved in it, because it's not just the typical legislative process. So that is really one to get engaged in. And then the other one is, we just saw the rebalanced budget kind of plug in the hole and the stopgap budget, but we have the full biennial budget coming up, meaning they are addressing everything soup to nuts with that budget in the city. And as many politicians have said, many people have said, budgets are moral documents. And this is where priorities are developed, where when we say Black Lives Matter, when we say we care about, finding people homes, about making sure people are fed and taken care of, well, we'll see it with these numbers, or we won't. And really it is about how that impacts people. These aren't just numbers. These aren't just, lines on a spreadsheet. They're things that impact people. So I would say stay tuned, have the same level of engagement and accountability that you brought to the other process with both the Police Officers Guild contract and the budget.
All right, Michael.
Yeah, you saw the heat that was brought just with getting police defunded by 1%. I mean, we're going to be looking at 50 times harder of an effort just to get it to that 50%. So, I mean, I encourage people to stay geared in, locked in, writing people, emailing people, showing up to meetings. I mean, that stuff is effective. That's what people get paid a lot to encourage people to do. So I think the path is there. You can see the results from this hard work. I would encourage you to keep fighting, keep the pedal to the metal. I mean, that's what change is enacted by groups of people, small groups of people. So I mean, believe in the morality of your cause and work hard and just keep showing up. And I think you've seen a lot from a lot of these activists through the city. You've seen keep showing up year after year after year and saying the same things. And I think that's why we've seen the ball move in the direction we have. So shout out to everybody that's been working really hard to get these issues across the finish line. And, you know, the last bit here is going to be the hardest. And so I hope everybody's geared in to do everything they can to really, you know, continue to learn and understand the context, to think about the history of these movements and to build upon that, to think about what didn't work, what did work before, and really use that as to impact your own vision and to enact what you want for your community to look like. Because as broken this system is, it does allow for change, and we need to do that. You have to be engaged. And apathy, the price of apathy is to be ruled by evil people. And, you know, like, the more that you just don't pay attention, the more that you're not engaged, decisions are being made whether you like it or not. And so I think we've seen when people are actually engaged and know what's happening, that a lot of this isn't going to go on like it had in the past. People rely on you not showing up. So when you do, that's your power, because your vote matters just as much as that millionaire's at the end of the day if you do show up. So I encourage everyone to just make yourself as present, as loud, as vocal. People say Twitter might not be real, but it's certainly real to some people.
There it is. You know, I thought about it. I was like, this has been such a great conversation. We're not going to take it backwards and spiral it by talking about this debate. We'll do that another time. But before we get out of here, want you guys to be able to tell the public here, the viewing public, how they can catch up with you. Go ahead. Start with you, Crystal.
You can find me on Twitter. I'm Finch Fry, FINCHFRII. I host Hacks and Wonks on KVRU, and it's available as a podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, just search Hacks and Wonks. It's there twice a week. I'll be tomorrow evening. I'll be hosting moderating a debate between the 43rd Legislative District candidates, Sheree LaSalle's and Frank Chop. So we will be talking about the issues there and just, you know, stay engaged, pay attention. Like Michael said, people rely on you not showing up and not paying attention. And every big movement that we've seen at the national level has started locally, you know, and perfect example, $15 an hour started in SeaTac, and we have presidential candidates talking about it. So stay engaged, because this change will lead the nation and show the nation the path that they can take to do the same thing.
All right. And also we need to let people know that you are, where is it at here? You are a huge Lakers fan.
Yes.
and that was the real debate. The real debate was whether the Lakers game was going to end before 9 p.m. and it did. And the Lakers had a blowout over there. Michael, tell people how they can get up with
blowout.
Sure. I'm more behind the scenes, but I would love to meet with anybody anytime. You can find me at our website, upperleftstrategies.com, or email me anytime, Michael at ulstrategies.com.
All right, Michael, Crystal, I'm sure you'll be watching tomorrow, you know, and I hope that we can do a follow-up show with you guys, you know, some takeaways of what you saw from the town hall. And now that we're deep in the political season, we'd love to also talk to you more about races that are going on. So here's the thing: is like, man, we always want to inform people. There's a lot of ballot initiatives and different races and everything else that's out there. So we'd really love to have you guys back to be able to inform the public about some of these other things that are going on. People always think presidential race and they forget about all these local things that are happening around them. So it would be great to have you on again.
Absolutely. And thank you for all the work that you're doing to help engage and educate. Like it is making a difference.
Donate to this man, please. He deserves it. He's the candle at both ends. Great work, Omari. Honestly, it's an honor to watch you from the outside, putting in the hustle. So thank you for all you do to bring transparency to this process.
Well, man, thank both of you guys. I appreciate you, and we'll be talking to you soon.